Hi there, and welcome to video number 2. In this video, there are 3 learning intentions and 3 success criteria. The first learning intention is to identify the individuals involved in spiritual practices, and the success criteria is I can name the individuals and describe their cultural roles. The second learning intention is to explain the role of oral tradition in Native societies. The success criteria is that I can explain the role of oral tradition in Native societies by using examples of their cultural expression. And finally, the third learning intention is to describe the sharing of goods and the role of gifts in Native societies. And the success criteria is that I can explain the sharing of goods and the role of gifts in Native societies. In Native societies, there was much respect for nature and the world around where the people lived. The central concept that people believed in was called animism. This involved the unity of the universe and the circle of life. At its heart, Aboriginal people believed that all things in nature had a spirit, whether they were animate or alive, or inanimate or not alive. Individuals had spiritual connections then to the world around them. All people were spiritual beings, and all things were spiritual beings as well. So, for example, a hunter may pray to the animal that he sought to kill, and then would make offerings after he killed it. Indeed, many times they believe that the animal had given itself up to the hunter in order to sustain the group, for example. As such, most Aboriginal groups did not practice overhunting, for example, but wanted to maintain a balance in nature. However, there were some people in societies that had greater powers to link to the spiritual world. These were called the shaman, although sometimes they could be women, also known as medicine men. They were the interpreters of dreams. They also practiced special rites and rituals. Indeed, some of these people in some groups had greater powers than the chiefs because of their links to the spirit world. Linked to these ideas of the shaman and spirits was the idea of oral tradition. Now, oral tradition held that it was important mostly because these groups didn't have formal writing systems. So everything had to be passed on down through the generations orally. This could be, what, for example, sites were specific for different rituals. Or they could be teaching the history of the group. Education, so how did young people learn to hunt and trap, or make tools, or bring up children, for example. As well, they used oral tradition to explain the world around them, how they came to be. So they used these to explain everything in their lives. The keepers of oral tradition were the elders. The elders had great respect in their groups. They were the ones that explained the myths. So, for example, here you have an image of the world creation myth of the Iroquois. Sometimes oral tradition was augmented by objects. So this here is a wampum belt. It was made up of shells. Wampum were used for ceremonial purposes. They told stories, although the stories were not specific. So, for example, the images here on the belt could tell a specific story, but it was up to the person to interpret that story. Here we have a chief holding a wampum belt. These belts were used for ceremonies. They could be used for sealing alliances, and were also used sometimes as a trade good, and later, after the arrival of Europeans, as a form of currency. Now, to go along with oral tradition and the idea of the wampum, also went gift giving. So Aboriginal people in North America operated under what some ethno-historians have called the law of hospitality, in that when you received visitors to your group, you had to treat them with great respect. And the more that you gave them, the greater the prestige that you got from them. So gift giving then had a ceremonial function. It created prestige and status for different groups. Gifts were also used to seal agreements and alliances. They were metaphors for words and had a highly ceremonial purpose. They also were not everlasting, so that alliances, for example, had to be continuously, renewed by the giving of more gifts. Thanks for watching this second video. Please remember to complete the summary in your own words, about 2 to 3 sentences. And finally, consider this essential question: what was life like before the arrival of Europeans in North America?